Hello my friends and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we will talk about a movie called Just Mercy, which tells the story of a man named Walter, who is wrongly accused of a crime. One night, while returning home to his wife and children, he is stopped at a police checkpoint and subjected to intense and invasive identity checks. The officers accuse him of having an affair with a white woman, which makes him fear for his safety. In the news, it is announced that he is being accused in the case of a young woman named Rhonda Morrison. Despite being innocent, he is found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. After that, the judge changes the sentence to the DDH penalty. The movie is based on real events and highlights the injustices that people of color face in the criminal justice system. The action takes place in the state of Alabama. A student at Harvard, Bryan Stevenson, visits a prison and meets a man named Davis who has been wrongly convicted. They realize they have much in common and exceed the allotted visitation time, which angers the prison guard. After this meeting, Bryan decides to work to help people in the same situation as Davis. His decision is met with reluctance from his parents, especially his mother, who is worried about his safety. Bryan goes into town to meet with the owner of the building where he wants to open a law office. His collaborator, Eva Ansley, also arrives. The owner refuses to rent the office when he learns that their firm will defend black citizens sentenced to death. Seeing that he has nowhere to go, Eva proposes that Bryan move in with her and tells him that there have been many strange cases in her town, with false testimonies, fabricated evidence, and wrongful convictions. Bryan has already taken on his first clients from prison and goes to meet them. Usually, the guards do not sympathize with lawyers, but they try to humiliate Bryan by exaggerating the routine check. Herbert is the first inmate he meets in the interrogation room of the prison, and there is no clear evidence indicating his guilt. However, the court refused to consider his mental problems after the psychological trauma he experienced during the war or his military merits and sentenced him to death. Bryan continues to talk with other inmates, and in the end, he meets Walter. He tells him from the beginning that he does not want to talk to the young lawyer because the last one he talked to took money from his family and disappeared without doing anything for him. Walter says he no longer trusts anyone and has started studying the Constitution on his own. He encourages and tries to help his cellmates as well. Eva Ansley spends the night studying criminal cases and is convinced of the corruption that stretches from the sheriff to the judge. Walter's case concerns Bryan the most because his conviction is based solely on the testimony of two supposed witnesses who were with him on the night of the crime and did not run away even though they had the opportunity. One of them is Myers, who spent years in prison and received a light sentence for his crime, and the other, Bill, claimed that on the day of the crime, he saw Walter's truck at the laundry. Bryan goes to prosecutor Tommy Chapman in an attempt to obtain a fair trial, but he is met with coldness and refuses to give him the complete case file. In his quest for information from the crime scene, Bryan notices that the sheriff is always on his tail. In the evening, Bryan goes to Walter's family, where he is greeted by its members and by all of Walter's neighbors who support the idea that he is not guilty of the crime. Logically, he couldn't have done it because at the time of the crime, he was fixing his car's transmission with other neighbors. However, the blame was put on him, probably because Walter had a past affair with a white woman from the town. Darnell, a young man from the neighborhood, claims that Bill Hooks was with him at the auto shop all day and couldn't have seen Walter's car at the car wash, but testified in exchange for his freedom, being pardoned in a theft case. However, he is afraid to speak out, fearing that the police will falsely accuse him. Bryan returns to the prison and meets Walter again. He agrees to work with the lawyer because he hopes that his case will be reopened. Then he asks why he wants to help him, why he came to a small town lost in the middle of nowhere, and works for free with inmates. The lawyer tells him that he knows how it feels when no one cares about you because when he was a teenager, his grandfather was killed and no one came to help. Back in the cell, Walter finds out that Herbert has been scheduled for execution and tries to encourage him, telling him that Bryan is handling the case, and it's not all lost. Overnight, the phone in Eve's house rings and the person on the other end tells her that they have planted an explosive device under her house and will blow up her family if she doesn't stop working for Bryan. He tells her to back down, but she refuses to accept the blackmail. The two lawyers try to gather more information from the locals about the killing of Rhonda Morrison, but no one wants to talk about it out of fear. Bryan manages to rent a house where he sets up his office, and the two will continue to work to help those who have been wrongly convicted. Later, he receives a call and rushes to the sheriff's office, where Darnell is accused of giving false testimony about Bill Hooks and is now scared and regrets telling the truth. Bryan enters the sheriff's office to clarify the situation, but he and the prosecutor tell him that his request to reopen the case has already been denied. That night, while driving home, the lawyer is stopped by the police and threatened with a gun without any legal basis, to intimidate him and convince him to give up. The next day, he goes to meet Walter, who seems to have not lost hope and even has the strength to joke about Bryan. Stevenson then goes to see Myers, the main witness who initially hesitated to make statements about Walter's case, but eventually found out that he has 3 children. Myers tells Bryan that the sheriff and prosecutor were determined to find a culprit in Rhonda's case and didn't realize that Walter would receive the death penalty. But in court, he won't say anything. The lawyer searches through Myers' files for his initial statements and discovers the audio recordings of the interrogation where Myers doesn't want to lie, accusing Walter, but doesn't have any other way out. Herbert is about to be taken to the electric chair and cries in his cell, while Walter tries to calm him down and not lose hope. Bryan files a new motion for a stay of execution, but it is rejected by the judge. He then goes to Herbert's execution to support him in his final moments. The other inmates bang their metal cups against the bars in protest, and the sound echoes all the way to the execution chamber. Bryan leaves devastated after Herbert's execution and goes back to working on Walter's case, knowing he can't bear to see another innocent person on death row. The next day, he goes back to Myers and tells him he listened to the recording of the first interrogation and that this is his last chance to do the right thing, because a father of 3 is about to be executed without any guilt. The hearing begins and Myers is called to the stand. At first, he hesitates out of fear of the sheriff, but after looking Walter in the eyes, he admits that he lied and that Walter wasn't at the dry cleaners on the day of the crime as he stated in the first trial. Bryan presents additional evidence and witnesses proving Walter's innocence, and the judge says he will review the evidence and announce his decision in a few days. On leaving the court, the guards offer Walter 5 minutes with his family, whom he hasn't seen in 6 years since he's been in prison. A month later, the judge, ignoring all the clear evidence and Myers' statement, announces his decision that Walter is to return to death row pending execution. Walter's son protests at the unexpected verdict and is grabbed by the guards. Bryan is devastated by the failure in court, but after a discussion with Eva where she tells him how much hope he brought to the community, he decides to continue the fight. He wants to involve prosecutors and judges from outside the area and appeal to the Supreme Court. The lawyer turns to television to make Walter McMillian's case known. In a few months, the Supreme Court sends a response that overturns the verdict and allows the case to be reopened. But their joy is short-lived as they receive a letter from Prosecutor Chapman requesting a delay in the hearing to strengthen the case. The lawyer goes to Chapman's house and tries to awaken his conscience, telling him that his job as a prosecutor is to seek justice regardless of skin color or wealth. On the day of the trial, Bryan has the first word and impresses the audience with his plea for equality and justice. Then it's the prosecutor's turn, who, to everyone's surprise and the sheriff's indignation, joins the movement to withdraw all charges. The judge, in the given situation, when all evidence of the accusation has been withdrawn, declares Walter McMillian innocent and sets him free. Walter bursts into tears surrounded by his family. He then goes to his cell to collect his personal belongings and say goodbye to his colleagues who applaud him by banging their cups on the bars. Bryan takes Walter to his family, and they remain friends for the rest of their lives. Bryan Stevenson has dedicated his life to fighting for justice, representing the poor who have been wrongly incarcerated, and has taken over 140 convicts off death row. Eva continues to work for the Equal Justice Initiative. Walter passed away in 2013, seriously affected by dementia, which likely resulted from his wrongful conviction. So, that was today's movie. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to this channel to not miss any similar videos in the future. See you in the next one.